My beloved child. Stop for just a moment, because what you are about to hear is not the kind of song that simply enters your ears and disappears. There are songs that entertain you, songs that make you remember a beautiful evening, songs that remind you of someone you once knew, and then there are songs that seem to find a locked room inside your heart that even you had forgotten existed. This is one of those moments. A world legend singer has stepped forward and sung a song so deeply touching that people are not talking about the melody alone. They are talking about what happened inside them while listening to it. And there is something about this particular performance that makes it feel different from everything you have heard before. At first, you may think you are simply about to hear another beautiful voice. You may expect a familiar rhythm, a powerful chorus, perhaps a few emotional words. But wait. Because the real story begins before the first note is even completed. There is a reason this song feels as though it was written for the person sitting alone on the other side of this screen. There is a reason certain words seem to arrive at exactly the right moment. There is a reason one particular part of the song can make even a strong person suddenly become quiet. And if you have ever smiled in front of people while carrying something completely different inside your heart, then you need to stay with this story. Because this song is not really about fame. It is not really about a legendary voice. It is not even only about music. It is about something much more personal. It is about the emotions people hide when they do not know how to explain what they feel. It is about the memories that return when a melody reaches a place that ordinary conversation cannot reach. And here is the first revelation. The most powerful part of this performance is not the moment when the singer reaches the highest note. It is the moment when the voice becomes softer. Think about that. A world-famous singer who has spent years learning how to command enormous stages suddenly does something completely different. Instead of trying to overpower the listener, the singer seems to pull the listener closer. The voice becomes almost like a private conversation. One sentence feels like it was spoken to a person sitting alone late at night. Another sounds like a message someone has been waiting years to receive. And then comes the line that changes the entire emotional atmosphere. You may hear it and suddenly remember somebody you thought you had completely forgotten. Maybe it is someone who once believed in you when you did not believe in yourself. Maybe it is someone who left without giving you the explanation you deserved. Maybe it is a person you still care about but never speak about anymore. Or maybe it is not another person at all. Maybe the person you remember is an older version of yourself. The version of you who once had dreams without worrying about whether they would actually happen. The version of you who trusted easily. The version of you who could laugh without thinking about tomorrow. That is why this song feels so unusual. It does not force an emotion onto you. It quietly unlocks one that was already there. And if you are wondering why this matters so much, wait until you understand what happens next. There is a hidden emotional progression inside the song. It begins with longing. Then it moves into remembrance. Then something changes. The melody starts feeling almost like an answer to a question you never knew how to ask. The listener begins thinking, maybe I am not as forgotten as I thought I was. Maybe the things I went through actually meant something. Maybe somebody understood me even when I believed nobody did. That thought is powerful. Because sometimes the deepest pain is not what happened to us. Sometimes the deepest pain is believing that nobody noticed. Nobody saw the nights when we stayed awake thinking about everything. Nobody saw the moments when we wanted to say something but decided to remain silent. Nobody saw the times when we gave someone another chance while quietly wondering whether we should have given ourselves that chance instead. And then a song arrives. Just a song. Nothing more. Yet suddenly it feels like someone has walked into that hidden room and turned on a light. That is the kind of emotional experience this performance creates. But there is still something you have not discovered. The most touching moment is not at the beginning. It is not even in the first major chorus. It is waiting further ahead. And when you reach it, you may understand why this song has such an unusual effect on people. There is a moment when the singer almost seems to stop performing and simply feels the words. That tiny change is everything. The expression changes. The delivery changes. The space between the words becomes longer. And for a few seconds, the audience is no longer watching a world legend. They are watching a human being remember something. That is when the performance becomes unforgettable. Because perfection can impress you, but vulnerability can reach you. A flawless note can make you admire a singer, but a trembling emotion can make you understand them. And perhaps that is why this particular song feels like it arrived at the exact moment you needed it. You may have been scrolling without expecting anything meaningful. You may have thought this was simply another video. But there is a reason you stopped here. Maybe the title caught your attention. Maybe the image made you curious. Maybe the voice itself drew you in. But now something deeper is happening. The song is beginning to remind you of a truth you may have ignored for too long. You do not always need to explain your heart to everyone. Some emotions are too deep for ordinary words. Some memories are too precious to be discussed casually. Some people leave an imprint that remains long after their footsteps disappear. And sometimes a melody becomes the language that finally says everything you could not say yourself. That is why you should not rush through this. Listen carefully to the emotional journey. Because the next part is where the song stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a personal message. And once you understand that, you will notice something else. The song is not only about missing someone. It is about realizing that love, gratitude, regret, hope, and remembrance can exist inside the same heart at the same time. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can forgive someone without inviting them back into your life. You can remember a beautiful chapter without wanting to live inside it again. You can cry for something that ended and still be grateful that it happened. That is the maturity hidden inside this melody. And perhaps the most beautiful discovery is that the song does not tell you to remain trapped in the past. It does something much more powerful. It reminds you that the past can be honored without becoming your prison. That is a message many people need to hear. Especially those who have spent months or years pretending they are completely fine. Because there is a difference between being strong and becoming silent about everything you feel. There is a difference between healing and simply becoming good at hiding pain. There is a difference between moving on and forgetting. This song touches that difference. And that is why the first few seconds may seem simple, while the later moments become almost impossible to ignore. The deeper you listen, the more personal it becomes. The melody begins as music. Then it becomes memory. Then it becomes a conversation. And eventually, it becomes a mirror. A mirror that quietly asks you one question. What is the one thing your heart has been trying to tell you that your lips never found the courage to say? Do not answer quickly. Let that question remain with you. Because the answer may be connected to why this song feels so unusually powerful tonight. There is another reason this performance can hit so deeply, and it has almost nothing to do with how famous the singer is. Imagine the thousands of people who have heard that voice over the years. Imagine the enormous stages, the bright lights, the applause, the celebrations, the awards, the moments when an entire crowd sings along. Now remove all of that. Remove the fame. Remove the spotlight. Remove the history. Imagine the singer standing in a quiet room with nothing except a microphone and a memory. Suddenly the same voice means something completely different. That is the emotional world this song creates. It makes you wonder what exists behind the public image. What does a legend think about when the stage becomes empty? What memory can still make a person who has performed before millions become quiet? What name might still live inside a heart even after years have passed? And that is where the song becomes mysterious. Because it never gives you every answer. It leaves enough space for your own story to enter. Perhaps that is why one listener hears a song about a lost love, while another hears a song about a parent, a friend, a child, a dream, or a life that changed unexpectedly. The melody becomes a blank page, and every listener writes their own memory onto it. That is rare. Most songs tell you exactly what to feel. This one seems to ask you what you already feel. There is a huge difference. And somewhere around the middle of the performance, the emotional atmosphere begins to shift again. The singer reaches a section where the words sound almost like an apology and a thank you at the same time. That combination is devastatingly beautiful because real life often works exactly like that. We have people we wish we had treated differently. People we wish we had called sooner. People we wish we had hugged longer. People we wish we had told, "You mattered to me," before circumstances made those words difficult to say. Sometimes we do not realize the importance of an ordinary moment until it becomes a memory. A simple conversation can become precious years later. A familiar voice can become something we would give anything to hear again. A place we once wanted to leave can become a place we miss. And a person we once assumed would always be there can become the person we think about whenever a particular song begins. This is why the song feels almost dangerous to the emotions, even though there is nothing harsh or frightening about it. It simply refuses to let you hide from yourself. It asks you to look at what you have been carrying. It asks you to remember without shame. It asks you to feel without pretending. And there is something almost shocking about how quickly a melody can do that. You might spend an entire year avoiding one memory, yet a 3-minute song can bring it back in seconds. You might believe you have moved beyond a certain emotion, yet one lyric can prove that the emotion was simply waiting quietly. You might think you have forgotten someone's voice, only to realize you can still hear it perfectly when the right melody begins. That is the power of music. It does not always create memories. Sometimes it reveals the memories that were already living inside us. And now comes the revelation that makes the title feel even more meaningful. The legendary singer is not simply singing about heartbreak or longing. The deeper message is about the moment when the human heart finally understands that some connections do not need constant contact to remain meaningful. You can lose touch with someone and still carry gratitude for them. You can walk separate paths and still wish them peace. You can stop speaking and still remember what their presence taught you. You can close a chapter without pretending that the chapter never mattered. This is why the performance feels more mature than ordinary emotional music. It is not begging the past to return. It is honoring what the past gave. That distinction is enormous. And perhaps that is why people who have experienced real emotional change will understand this song differently. Someone young may hear a beautiful melody. Someone who has lived through separation may hear a story. Someone who has experienced loss may hear a farewell. Someone who has finally healed may hear freedom. And someone who is still waiting for closure may hear the sentence they needed years ago. That is what makes a song legendary. Not merely the number of people who hear it, but the number of people who recognize themselves inside it. And if you have ever wondered whether your own emotions were too complicated to explain, this performance gives you another answer. Maybe you were never supposed to explain everything. Maybe some things were meant to be felt first. Maybe the silence you carried was not emptiness. Maybe it was a language. Maybe every tear you wiped away was evidence that something mattered. Maybe every person you lost changed you in ways you did not notice at the time. Maybe every disappointment taught you to recognize something beautiful when it finally arrived. And maybe this is why the song has found you now. Not because some magical force selected you, but because your own experiences have created the emotional space to understand it. That is even more powerful. Because it means the song is not simply coming toward you. Your own story is meeting the song halfway. And that is the moment when music becomes personal. There is another subtle detail you should notice when the song reaches its emotional peak. The singer does not seem to rush toward the final note. Instead, the performance feels as though it is intentionally holding something back. That restraint creates suspense. You know something is coming, but you do not know exactly what. The melody becomes quieter. The emotion becomes heavier. The words seem to carry more weight. And then, almost unexpectedly, the singer gives the listener a moment of silence. That silence may be more powerful than any note. Because in that silence, your own thoughts begin speaking. Suddenly you are not thinking about the singer anymore. You are thinking about your own life. Someone appears in your mind. A room appears. A face appears. A conversation you never finished appears. A dream you abandoned appears. And suddenly you realize why the song felt so familiar. It was never trying to tell you someone else's story. It was giving you permission to remember your own. But do not assume the emotional journey ends there. The most surprising part comes when the song begins changing its meaning. At first, it sounds like someone looking backward. Then it begins sounding like someone finally understanding why the past happened. That is a massive emotional shift. There is a point in life when we stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What did this teach me?" Those two questions may sound similar, but they create completely different futures. The first keeps you staring at the wound. The second makes you look for meaning. And this song seems to travel from one question to the other. That is why the final sections feel lighter without becoming less emotional. The sadness remains, but it is no longer helpless sadness. It becomes gratitude. It becomes acceptance. It becomes the quiet realization that something can have ended and still have been beautiful. This is one of the hardest lessons the human heart can learn. We often believe that if something ended, then it must have been a mistake. But not everything that ends was a mistake. Some people are chapters. Some moments are seasons. Some dreams are stepping stones. Some relationships teach us what we need to know before we meet the people who truly understand us. And some losses teach us how precious the present really is. The song seems to understand this without shouting it. It simply lets the emotion unfold. That is what makes it feel so sincere. And there is something else you should consider. A world legend could easily choose a song designed only to impress. Something technically difficult. Something full of dramatic moments. Something created to make people applaud. But the performance we are talking about feels different because the goal appears to be connection rather than demonstration. It is as though the singer is saying, "I do not need you to admire me. I need you to feel this." That is an extraordinary difference. When an artist stops trying to prove how talented they are and starts revealing something human, the audience changes too. They stop watching. They start remembering. And that is exactly what keeps people emotionally connected to a performance. You are no longer waiting for the next note. You are waiting to discover what the song will make you remember next. That is why the suspense is not created by a shocking event. It is created by emotional anticipation. You know there is another layer coming. You know the song has not revealed everything yet. You know one more line, one more pause, one more change in the singer's voice could completely transform what you thought the song meant. And then comes a moment that may feel almost impossible to ignore. The singer reaches a phrase that sounds less like a performance and more like a confession. It feels like something that could have been said privately, with no audience present. And suddenly the entire song becomes intimate. You realize that every person has at least one sentence they wish they could send into the past. Maybe it is, "I am sorry." Maybe it is, "I forgive you." Maybe it is, "I never stopped caring." Maybe it is, "You did more for me than you ever knew." Maybe it is, "I am proud of you." Or maybe it is simply, "I wish you were here." The remarkable thing is that the song does not need to tell you which sentence is yours. Your heart already knows. And if one sentence has appeared in your mind while reading this, do not dismiss it. That is the part of the song that belongs to you. It may explain why you were drawn to this story. It may explain why the performance feels different from ordinary music. Because sometimes the most emotional songs do not introduce new feelings. They give old feelings a voice. And there is another revelation hidden inside that idea. You may have believed that the reason you miss a certain person is because you want them back. But sometimes that is not the truth. Sometimes you miss who you were when you were with them. Sometimes you miss the hope you had during that chapter. Sometimes you miss the version of yourself who had not yet learned certain lessons. And sometimes you are not longing for the person at all. You are longing for the feeling of being understood. That distinction can change everything. It can turn a painful memory into a lesson. It can turn regret into gratitude. It can turn an old wound into proof that you once cared deeply. And that is where the song becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a quiet conversation with the parts of yourself you usually keep busy enough to avoid. The world is loud. Every day brings notifications, responsibilities, conversations, expectations, and endless reasons to keep moving. But a song like this can create a small space where everything becomes quiet. In that quiet, you finally hear what you have been thinking. And perhaps the most beautiful thing you discover is that you are still capable of feeling deeply. You are still capable of remembering. You are still capable of loving what was good without needing to return to what was over. You are still capable of hope. That is not weakness. That is evidence that your heart survived everything it had to survive and still remained capable of recognizing beauty. Listen carefully to the next emotional turn. The melody begins carrying a subtle sense of hope. Not the loud kind of hope that promises everything will magically become perfect.